Hey friends, welcome to Pastors in Recovery. I'm Jon Hammond, and I'm so glad you're here today. I've got a really special guest, and even more special story for you. Terry Gurno, a friend of mine, we go way back, all the way to Bible school, in fact, and both of us started out as youth pastors in small communities. And, well, you know how it goes. Life has a way of taking us places we never expected, right? Terry's journey is one of those stories. He went from being a youth pastor to helping plant a massive church. And then, after the lead pastor passes away from cancer, Terry is handed the reins. Sounds like a dream, but it was tough. So tough that he eventually walked away from ministry altogether. This is the first part of our conversation, and it's about his time in ministry, the struggles he faced, the heartache that came, trying to figure out who he was, and then it all fell apart. It's honest and real, and I think you're going to find a lot to relate to. So grab some coffee, and let's jump right in.
Welcome to Pastors in Recovery, a podcast dedicated to ministry leaders and pastors navigating the challenges of their own hurts, hang-ups, and habits. Hosted by Jon Hammond, a grateful believer in Jesus Christ and a pastor on the road of recovery. This space is here to remind you that God's grace is bigger than any struggle. Each episode brings real stories of redemption, practical tools for healing, and encouragement rooted in Christ's promise of renewal. You don't have to walk this journey alone. Let's explore how God meets us in our brokenness and brings light to our darkest moments. Welcome to the conversation.
So, to start off, first of all, Terry, it's so great to have you on this podcast. What a pleasure it is. We've gone way back in our relationship. We've known each other since Bible college.
Yeah.
And so, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Jon. It's great to be here. And, you know, one of the things I love about social media and Facebook is you can stay connected to people, even though you're not that close in proximity. You're not running into them at a convention or at the grocery store or wherever. And so I've just enjoyed being able to stay connected with you, even though we've been quite a ways apart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. So today I'm going to ask you some questions. And the reason why I've actually invited you onto the podcast is because, as the listeners know, this podcast is about pastors in recovery. And at first I started off just like, it's hurts, hang-ups, and habits and things that we struggle with. But then as I begin to continue to move forward in this journey of mine, I begin to see that there's a lot of physical suffering and physical challenges that people have that are actually greatly connected, that we are not like a separate person. We're not like just our mind or just our body or just spiritual, but we're all one. It's all one thing. And so when I began to learn about what you're going through, I thought, oh my goodness, I got to get Terry on the podcast because there's such a connection. There's such an encouragement.
Yeah.
First inspired you to go into ministry and how those early experiences shaped you.
Yeah. It's a great question. I didn't grow up as a Christian or a Christ follower. I actually received Christ when I was a couple of years out of high school. And I just remember that was a day that completely, I knew I was changed, and I'd gone to church a lot in my lifetime. My family was Catholic, but they were like, occasionally going to, church. And in that environment, I have an awareness of God, but really didn't understand anything that was going on, but just had this awareness and belief that there was God. And so going through, junior high and high school, I was invited to other types of churches, Mormon church, Jehovah's Witness, different types of churches like that. And to be honest, I just thought they were all pretty much the same, just a different name. And still, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. So when I was invited to go to a Baptist church, a couple of years out of high school on Easter, it was the first time I heard the gospel in a way that I could really understand it. And I knew that I wanted that. This second chance, this forgiveness of sin, this hope that I could have for my life. Because to be honest, I didn't have a lot of hope or direction for my life. And some of that comes from the fact that I grew up in a very abusive, alcoholic home. And then on top of that, some pretty severe learning disabilities. And so, I didn't believe college was ever an avenue that I could pursue. In fact, I had teachers encourage me not to, just because they didn't believe that I would be able to make that. And, So, so for the couple of years out of high school, I was just doing all kinds of construction and stuff I didn't like to do because I'm more of a people person. I wanted to be around people. And so just a lot of things going on. And just, I was praying, hey, God, if you're real, show me. I'd been praying that in junior high school, in high school at different times, and then praying it at this time. So invited to church. And so I went, and then I had this new life, right? I was a Christian, but I didn't know much about God or Jesus or the Bible. And so I went to the closest Bible school I could go to, which was Northwest. I mean, that was it. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I need for what I want to pursue. Because I didn't go to pursue ministry at all. I was actually pursuing becoming a firefighter is what I was doing while I was going to Northwest. But I just wanted a Bible education. And so I went there, and again, my first year, I had no intentions of going into ministry. The second year, no intentions of going into ministry. Third year, no intentions. Took a year off because I got married. And then once I got married, I thought, okay, I got to get serious about my life and start taking business courses. So I actually went to a community college, started taking some business classes. And I remember, believe it or not, John, I was watching Geraldo Rivera, and he was doing yeah, I know. He was doing a piece on Satanism in America that was really centered around youth and how they were being attracted to this dark side. And honestly, I was living in Spokane at the time, taking business courses, and that just broke my heart for youth. I mean, literally. And I shared it with my wife the next day and said, honey, my heart is so broke for these youth that I feel like I should go back to school and I should go into ministry. And that's kind of really how my ministry calling happened. And so I did. I went back to school, finished, started an internship in my senior year, halfway through at a church in Kent, and that's where I grew up. It was right next door to the high school that I went to. And Kent is the city that I received Christ in. So it was kind of cool how all of this happened, but there was no intention going into Bible college, that ministry. In fact, it just, until that time, it didn't even enter my mind.
That's an incredible story. I don't remember the firefighter part, man. That's really cool. But Geraldo, let's give it up for Geraldo.
Come on, Geraldo. God's using Geraldo.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about your story is how you kept saying, I had no intentions of going into the ministry. And isn't it just like Jesus to find a person who has no interest in that calling, but then out of nowhere, it's kind of like Paul on the road to Damascus. He just kind of like, Jesus, who are you, Lord? And he goes, I'm Jesus. And he goes, why you keep kicking against the goats?
Yeah.
And it's like, you just wanted to do these things. You were doing construction and firefighting. I mean, that's a cool thing. Suddenly Jesus appears and says, through Geraldo.
Yeah. Come on, Geraldo.
In the form of Geraldo, he says, young people, you can make a difference. And so suddenly, wow, now, hey, I want to go into ministry, Nancy. Is this cool?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I could ever reproduce my journey in ministry ever, because it was, I remember when I went back to Northwest College, I just finished an internship in Spokane before I went back for my last year. And I said to my wife, I'm not doing any internships. I was working full time. I was taking like 23 credits a quarter because I was a little bit behind. And so I was just working, and I said, I don't want to do, an internship. I'm just going to focus and get through school. And I was sitting in a youth ministries class, and the professor said, hey, I've got an internship, opportunity for somebody. And I just tuned out because I thought, well, that's not me. And then he said, it's only for a married couple. And there was only a few of us in the room that were married. And I went, okay, I'll listen to this. And he said, and it's in Kent, Washington, where I grew up. And I thought, okay, I guess I am interested. And it was kind of funny because I got the information for the church and the pastor, and I let him know, hey, I'm coming down to sit through the service this weekend. And no kidding, John, I walk in, I look at the bulletin, and they introduced me as the new youth pastor intern. I'm not kidding. I'd never met him. People were coming up to us going, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you." And it's like, I didn't interview for it. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. And it was like, and I just went, "Okay, I guess I'm the guy," and that's how it started.
Talk about being thrown right in.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing for me, John, is, I didn't grow up in church. I never had a youth group. So I didn't even know really how youth ministry should be done. We learned some things in college about youth ministry and ministry in general. And I just, it was, I don't know, I would just, but I was relational, right? And so for me, I tried to think, how do I build relationships with youth? And so when I got up there, of course, I love to communicate. I love people. So our youth ministry was, from Nancy and I, was very personable, very relationship oriented. So I did some things like I started a flag football league, right? Because I thought,
cool.
And you had to attend a church, at least youth group, at least 2 times a month to be on, and we had teams from, Tacoma all the way up to Bellingham. And so it was a way to outreach and stuff like that. And then I went to camp. I was at camp. I'd never been to camp in my whole life. And now I'm a camp counselor. And I met just a really good friend of mine now, Tom Dushman. And he really took me under his wings. And by the end of the week, I was on the camp committee to plan next year's camp, And so I just couldn't reproduce what happened.
Wow.
So we were in Kent for 5 years. And then I felt... I started, a couple of things happened. I started speaking at the high school that I went to. And I was not a Christ follower, and everybody knew that. And now I'm back. And I remember I really wanted to get on the campus. So I went up there one day and introduced myself to some health teachers and different people. And I said, "Hey, I just want you to know that one of the things I do is I speak at high schools." Well, I'd never done that. It would have been more accurate if I would have said I'm aspiring to, but,
right.
I don't know if anyone would ask me or invite me if I said that. So I said, yeah, one of the things I do is, I speak for to students and stuff like that. And, right then, the first time I went up there, I had a health teacher say, "Hey, great, can you speak next week?" I said, "Absolutely." And so I started doing that. And that led into doing more high schools and then assemblies, and forming an organization called Get Real Assemblies with a few friends. And we went around the country. So I did that after I transitioned out of, Kent. So I did that. And one of the things I learned, John, is I really don't like to travel much. I had a young family, my wife. And so, I really didn't enjoy traveling a lot. So I accepted a role in Spokane and continued to do some traveling part-time. And I really that was a much better mix for me. And then from there, I transitioned over to Paulsbo. I had an opportunity to join that team. And of course, that's the church that you grew up in. And I was there for just under 5 years. Really, really loved it.
So was the connection with Tom, was that how you ended up there?
Yeah.
The connection with Tom Dushman?
Yeah. And that was funny because, number one, I didn't apply. I've never applied for a ministry position ever. It was usually a call and a conversation. But when I was in Spokane, Tom called me and said, "Hey, Mark being the senior pastor at the church, he said, 'Hey, we're going to be in Spokane and we'd love to get together and just, have a meal.'" And I thought, fantastic. Well, I didn't know it was an interview. So I said, "Let me meet you, at this place." So I'm on my bike. I go for a bike ride. I'm in sweats, and stuff like that, because it's Saturday and it's like, hey, I'm just enjoying the day. So I meet them and they take me to the Coeur d'Alene Resort, and I just felt like we were meeting. I was like, "Yeah, hey, so tell me about you." And
let's just have lunch.
Yeah. So then they left, and he called me later on that week and said, "Hey, we'd love to, talk to you about maybe joining our team." And I said, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll talk about that." And so one thing led to another. And it was during that time where Tom said, that was actually our first interview. That's why we went to Spokane, was to meet you and to get to know you. So I had an invitation to go there. And so I did that. We were there just under 5 years. And while I was there, I was in Spokane before I made the move to Paulsbo. I worked with a guy by the name of Bruce Miles on staff in Spokane. And Bruce was getting ready to plant this church in Hayden, Idaho. And I loved Bruce. Bruce, I mean, if anyone's ever met Bruce, everybody loved him. He was such an encourager, personable guy. And I was sad that he was going over to the planted church, and he wasn't asking us to go. And because I would have went in a heartbeat. And so he left, he planted the church. I went to Paulsbo, and it was about 4.5 years into Paulsbo that he called me and said, "Hey, I have a role here for an associate pastor, and man, would you consider that?" And I thought, my gosh, yes, because I felt like my time in youth ministry was coming to an end. I'd been in ministry for 13.5 years. So I said yes. I went over there, interviewed with him, and he brought me on staff. So we moved in 1997. We moved our family to Hayden, Idaho, and it was great.
So now you're in Hayden, Idaho. I forgot about Bruce. So Bruce actually had he passed away from, like, was it cancer? Tell me a little bit about that story, because the whole thing that's interesting about it is how you, again, the guy who starts this church brings you there, and now suddenly, just like all the other situations you've been in, you're now thrust into this, here's this church.
Yeah.
You're the guy again.
Yeah. And I never anticipated being the guy, and I didn't want to be the guy, so I was there for about 2 years. And I remember coming home and telling Nancy, I've never been more fulfilled or happy in a role than I am right now. I loved being the second guy behind the scenes, helping Bruce in any way I could. And I just remember telling her that. And it was about 2.5 weeks after that Bruce called me into his office and said, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm going to go to Southern California and plant a church. And I think you should be the next lead pastor." And I went, "Oh," and I'll tell you what, I was so devastated, because I loved it. I could have been there, for a long time, just, being in the background, just helping. And then he was diagnosed with cancer, melanoma, and that was in April. And so he went through surgery, and then he went down to the John Wayne Cancer Center in Orange County, California, every Monday. He was there. So after church, he would fly down there, go through his treatment, and then fly home Monday night. And so the thing about cancer, and some people listening, if you know somebody, or if this is you yourself, is that you can have cancer and pretty severe or advanced and not even know it and feel completely healthy. And that's hard to wrap your head around, once you get diagnosed. And I can talk a little bit about that later. But anyway, Bruce looked great. He felt great. He had a lot of energy, but he began to go downhill. You could see it. He was, you could just see it. The signs were there, but he was still making plans. So when he was in California, he began to meet with people that wanted to help him plant this church. So he was doing that every Monday after his treatments, and then he would fly home. And so that was the plan. He was going to go down there. Well, he recommended that I be, follow him as the lead pastor. There was a vote. It was 100%. And the thing is, John, I know it wasn't 100%, because I know there were some people in the church, and even one person on the staff, that didn't believe I should be the senior pastor. And if I'm being completely honest, John, I didn't want to be the senior pastor. I really said yes because he felt that. And it was, the relationship I had with him is I just didn't want to let him down. And if I could go back in time, I would have declined that, to be honest. But I can't go back in time. So we had planned a farewell for him to move to California months in advance, probably in May. We picked a date. And so as that date got closer, his health went down and down and down. And the day that we had planned months in advance to send him off was his last Sunday. And it was incredible, because after church, we did this farewell, and it was like 4 hours, and it was a line of people. I mean, a solid line for 4 hours of people coming and thanking him for what he had meant to them, and the change that that he has brought to their life through the message of Jesus, and it was one of those things where if you wish that the person that had passed could hear the things that people are saying about them at their celebration of life. Well, this was that opportunity. It was like, man, he's getting to hear all this. So, and he passed away just a few days later, and now I'm the lead guy. And there were some things that Bruce and I had talked about. He said, these were things I'd never shared with anybody because I didn't feel like I needed to, but they're things that I needed to know as a lead pastor. And we talked about, hey, Terry, I haven't shared the vision or the mission of the church in several years. The church is beginning to drift. You need to get them back centered on what this is all about. And, he went on. And so that's what I was focused on. And I was focused on that. And, at the same time, we were building another facility so we could have 2 campuses in the same area. Bruce called it 2 harvesting machines, right? If we had 2 harvesting machines, be able to reach a lot more people. And that was Bruce's vision. And so, I inherited that. I was excited about it, but didn't know how it was going to work. It was a time when people weren't doing multiple campuses. It wasn't happening. And so I had hired a really good friend of mine, Bruce, and I hired him, Mike, and he became a speaking pastor. So we planted that church, and he and I would go back and forth every 2 weeks. And so that created.
So that was Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah.
And Rathdrum.
Yep. Yeah.
Can you talk about how interesting? I didn't want to miss this part and skip over it real quick, where that church grew really fast, right?
Yeah, it grew really fast.
And there was this what was called the seeker sensitive movement.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm interested in that is because when we were closer together again in proximity, because I was pastoring a church in Davenport, and I was like kind of going through some church planting training, and I was learning about this seeker sensitive movement and we're very interested in it. And I remember one of the associates at your church came to me and says, "You don't want to do this." And I'm like, "Why not? It sounds great. Churches grow really fast. You reach lots of people." But he said, "No, you don't understand. You don't want to do this." And I think the reason why I'm asking this is because this being a recovery podcast, it's like, if it feels like maybe there was a lot of pain and heartache and struggle that you all had to go through.
Yeah.
After Bruce died, it's like you inherited this thing that you had to work through.
Yeah, absolutely. The church had drifted, and really it reached a lot of people that for the first time received Christ. That was awesome. But it also reached a lot of people that were disgruntled and not happy with traditional church, right? And so, they came and they were happy for a while, but then they wanted things that were not wrong. It's just, that's not what the church was focused on. It was focused on reaching people. And so, it just became a little bit divisive. And so when Bruce left and I really brought the vision and the mission back, the feeling in the congregation was I was changing the direction of the church, right? And so they were resistant to that. And I'll tell you, it was hard, and there was a ton of pain that I went through, and I think pastors a lot of time are misunderstood because, John, what I've realized is we don't have conversations in the church about what's going on. We just make statements. We don't sit down and we don't talk about it. We just make statements from observations, from personal feelings, from personal experiences. And then we make our own conclusions, and all of that was happening. And at the same time, the entire church is grieving, right? And I didn't recognize I needed to let the church grieve. So, and I didn't. I said, "Hey, we're moving forward." This was Bruce's heart. And so I just bypassed everybody's, how they were doing emotionally and losing the senior pastor and the person that they loved. And so again, man, almost from day one, I started hearing, a lot of these comments coming back, and it was just the beginning of that. And then when we planted the other church, we opened it, and we had we had some of the people at the mother church go to this other one. Then it felt like, wasn't a church split, but it felt like a church split, even though Mike and I were going back and forth. And then it got back to us that, the people at the mother church felt like they didn't know who their pastor was, but the people at the new church loved it because they didn't know any different, right? And the campus began to grow, and that's when we knew, we got to plant this as its own church because it's getting a life of its own. And I remember what the thing that really helped us to know this is we told the new campus, hey, we're going to do one service for the entire church. We're going to bring two campuses together, and the people attending the new campus said, oh, there's another campus. They had no idea. That's all they knew, and they loved it. And the people at the old mothership, they didn't like it. They didn't know who the leader was. They were hurting. Jon, I was hurting. I never stopped to grieve this man that I admired and that I loved and that I respected. And so many ways, you can't outrun a rumor, but I tried. I tried to outrun this rumor, get in front of, the rumors, that were going out there. And, Jon, it was just layer upon layer to the point where, Jon, I was completely depleted in every way, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I was depleted. And I came to the point, Jon, where I told my wife, I don't know what I'm going to do moving forward, but I know what I'm not going to do. And I'm not going to stay here and continue to be the senior pastor. I don't know, Jon, if I had a breakdown or not, but if I didn't, I had 1 foot off the ledge. I was just done.
Wow.
Most painful experience I've ever been through, not just for me, but of course for my wife too, because they feel what we feel, right? And they're protected.
Yeah, they do.
So it was just, it was difficult.
Did you have anyone in your life that you could share these hurts with at the time?
No, because what happened is I began to lose trust in just everybody around me, including the team and including my best friend.
Yeah.
That was the pastor of the other campus.
Yeah.
And I never told anybody that. I never told people that my trust level was going down. And
right.
So, no,
you had to keep it up. You had to keep the facade up.
Yeah, I had to keep it up. And Jon, I was so depleted, but I had nobody. And I felt totally isolated and probably went into some depression, to be honest.
Yeah. Let me just jump in on here on this point, because this is, oh my gosh, this is so powerful what you're saying, because this probably resonates with the people that listen to this podcast and even the recovery groups that I lead with pastors. The things that I hear is, I'm just going to talk directly to the pastor right now that's listening, and that, hey, pastor, if you're feeling all alone with what you're going through, you were not meant to go through this alone. And you need somebody in your life that you can share this stuff with, in a safe environment. And that's really what pastors' recovery groups are about, is being able to have a place where you can share your hurts, hangups, and habits and know that it's never going to leave that group. You're not going to lose your ministry. Your wife's not going to find out that you might have sexual addiction. No one's going to know that you're struggling with, lust, or that you're drinking, or maybe you're, been taking your your medication, maybe you're addicted to opioids, and that's how you've been coping. And maybe you're even going to church high because you're trying to medicate the pain. Nobody knows you're taking marijuana, in the form of edibles or something. And the truth is everybody has to deal with their hurts, hangups, and habits, and are going to find a way to medicate that pain. And if it isn't through Jesus, it's because we have gone through the journey alone.
Yeah.
And I believe that even good men like you who are pastors are dealing with these things, and you've been going through the journey alone. So I cannot say enough in this point of this podcast right now, this episode here with my friend Terry, that nobody has meant to go through their journey alone. So Terry, this kind of gives me a good transition to, so you kind of like leave the ministry, right?
Yeah.
And you start doing things that, because of your personality, you're a people person, you're good with people, you can pretty much sell anything, you can talk about it. So you kind of went off in that way. And I'm kind of interested to see, what lessons do you remember God teaching you? First of all, talk about, you don't have to get in details, but just what are the things you did that were not ministry to try to put bread on the table, for your family? And then what lessons do you know that God was teaching you during that time?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I transitioned out of ministry, as we know, and I started applying for jobs. John, I applied 9 months. 9 months, I didn't get one interview, not one interview. And people were they weren't looking to hire a burned out minister. They just didn't want that.
Right.
Nobody said, if we could just find that would help our company.
Yeah. If we could just find a guy who's gone through what Terry's gone through, he's on board.
Yes. So I ended up honestly selling cars at a Cadillac dealership in our area. And the only reason why I got that job is a guy who attended the church. It was a friend of mine. He was the general manager, and I asked for an interview because I wasn't getting any. And I said, and I hadn't interviewed anywhere, for 20 years. And so I said, will you give me a mock interview and give me feedback on how I do? And so he did. And then he ended up calling me and saying, I think we want to hire you. And I said, okay. So they hired me to be a salesman.
Oh my God.
John, yeah, you said something there a minute ago that I could sell anything to anybody, but I remember in the interview, I was asked, what makes you think you can sell? And that's when I realized, John, I'd never sold anything. I'm a persuader. I'm not a salesman. There's a big difference. Persuader is getting somebody to come to your point of view, right? But a salesperson is saying, will you take it home today? Right? So you have to give them an experience. You have to build value. You've got to get to know, what their needs are. And then you've got to be able to get to a point where you close the deal and say, absolutely, I will. And I realized I'd never done that. And I remember saying, I was so depleted. I just was like, look, I don't know if I can sell, but I think I have the raw material to be a salesman. So my question for you is, would you invest in me what I need to become that salesman? I left that and I called my wife and said, I'm not getting the job. This is not going to work out. And because I didn't have confidence in myself. And I think that may have came through in my answer. And so, but sure enough, they called me a few hours later and said, hey, you've got the job. So I started selling cars. John, I loved it. I loved it because the whole concept of selling, I loved it because it's all about building value, right? It's not about getting somebody to do something they don't want to do. It's about identifying the need, what brought them in. And what I realized, John, this comes from ministry experiences. Everybody comes on a car lot because something in their life has changed. And I think most people go to a church for the first time, or they come back to church because something in their life has changed. And when we can identify what's changed and meet them at their point of need, then we have the ability to bring people together with a solution, with an answer, with a step forward. And that's how let me share just one story. I remember I had a lady come in and she was looking for a vehicle, and she had a 13-year-old daughter. And so she found this vehicle and she really, really liked it. And we went in and we were talking about it. And she said to me, Terry, she said, I need to go away and think about this, and number one, you never want people to leave and think about it. But I respected that. I said, yeah, you do what you got to do. So she went and had lunch. She came back and she said, Terry, I'm going to go ahead and buy the car. And I said, awesome. And she goes, do you want to know how I came up with my decision? I said, sure. She said, my parents treat me like I'm a kid, and I've never had to make a decision for myself like this. And I'm, this old. She was in her later 30s. And so I didn't know how to make a decision because I didn't call my parents. I didn't go to them and ask them because I don't think they would want me to do this. So she said, when I was at lunch, I tore up a napkin and I wrote, yes, no, yes, no. I turned all the pieces over and I just picked them up. Should I? And it was like I turned it over and it said yes. And that's how I made a decision. And I thought, my gosh, Here's somebody making a major decision using the blank side of a napkin. And that just broke my heart for her, because if that's what she's doing about a car, what is she doing about the major issues of her life, about when it comes to her child or her own life or her future? It just broke my heart. So I had the ability to really minister to people in that environment. I had the ability to minister with a lot of guys that I worked with that were not Christ followers. And I really found a lot of satisfaction. So for me, it was very fulfilling and very rewarding. And I did that for 3 years. And then I transitioned into real estate. But you need to know, during this time, my heart was hard towards the church. It wasn't hard towards God, but it was hard towards people. Because I felt like these people did me wrong. And I think a lot of times we get into that, these people did me wrong. Well, when I went into real estate, I attended several conferences, and one of them, the guy was he was actually the founder of the company, and he was doing a talk, and it was on the difference between a victim and a difference between somebody who's accountable. And as he went through and described the victim is the one that doesn't accept reality, places blame on other people, doesn't seek solutions, and eventually just gives up. And then he talked about the accountable person, seeks awareness, accepts responsibility, creates a plan to move forward. And in that moment, John, it wasn't a church environment at all. It was a bunch of real estate agents and business owners. I realized that for 5 years, I've been a victim and I blamed other people. In that moment, I shifted all that blame from all of these people, and I accepted the responsibility for the journey that I was on, and that it wasn't anybody's fault but mine. And I started thinking about what could I have done differently. And I'm telling you, John, in that moment, it was like 10,000 pounds of weight went off my shoulders. Man, it was unbelievable. But that's what I had to do. I started thinking about how could I have done this differently. And here's the deal. I mean, I had a lot of things I could have done differently, and I just didn't blame people anymore. And it was incredibly healing for me. And fortunately, in that environment, this is a real estate company that is a training and coaching company that sells real estate. They believe in developing the people within the company through training, through coaching, and through mentorship, which I never had. And as I went through that, John, my aha was, if I would have had these tools and these understandings when I was a pastor, I would have had a different outcome. I realized, I wasn't equipped, John. I think a lot of us are willing, but we're not equipped. We don't have the knowledge, the tools, we're not. And so I was so grateful for this company that honestly rebuilt my confidence as a leader, because I didn't want to lead anymore. I was done leading. I was like, nope, that's not for me. And so I'm grateful for that part of the journey.
Well, that's going to be it for today's podcast. We're going to continue Terry's story next week. And if this story has resonated with you, please jump on in and share this with a friend, another pastor or colleague. Thank you for joining me today in Pastors in Recovery. I hope this episode has offered you insights, encouragement, and real talk you needed. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're facing chemical dependency, battling sexual addiction, or carrying hurts from the past ministry challenges, you are not alone. Recovery is not just a destination, it's a daily walk of faith, one step at a time. If today's message resonated with you or sparked thoughts you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at pastorsinrecovery@gmail.com. Let's keep this conversation going and continue to support each other on this road of healing and growth. Until next time, stay anchored in hope, and remember, God meets us in our brokenness, and that's where the journey of restoration begins. Be blessed, and let's keep pressing on together.
Packing up my bags, heading out the door, left behind the life I knew before, longing for a sky that's open wide, beneath the stars where I can hide. This place once felt just like a home. Now it's somewhere I just roam. Farewell dreams, farewell lights, chasing those endless flights. Goodbye self, do I exist? Seeking solace in the mist. Every memory lingers still in the quiet on this hill. Old dreams, my heart grows cold. Shattered scenes and stories untold. Let the noise for whispers soft. In these moments lies my life come home. Farewell dreams, farewell lights, chasing those endless flights. Goodbye self, do I exist? Seeking solace in the mist. Fade the lines, guides my way. In this night I will stay, far from places I once knew, finding pieces I renewed to. Every memory lingers still in the quiet on this hill. Old dreams, my heart grows cold. Shattered scenes and stories untold. Left the noise for whispers soft. In these moments I'm alone. Seen in Jesus Christ. There's no hope in my old life. The road is hard to stay on path. Lord, set me free from my